Welcome to The Explainer. We're diving into something that's on a lot of people's minds. Is social media actually, reshaping the teenage brain? We've got some new research to unpack, so let's get into it.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at what's literally happening inside the brain. Then we'll get into the emotional piece, the whole idea of digital stress. After that, we'll talk about a way to fight back, a pretty cool coping strategy. And finally, we'll peek into the future and see what science is cooking up next.
All right, first up, the social media brain. So what is actually happening to our brains? A really fascinating landmark study from the University of North Carolina is giving us the first real long-term look at how all this tech use might be affecting brain development in teenagers.
So, the researchers kicked things off with a simple but pretty profound question. It's probably the same one you've asked yourself, right? Is social media actually changing your brain? And well, the answer is a bit more complicated than a simple yes or no.
Check this out. The study zeroed in on a specific group of teens they called habitual checkers. And what does that mean? These were the kids who were checking their social media feeds more than 15 times a day. Yeah, 15.
So over 3 years, something really interesting happened. The brains of these habitual checkers actually became hypersensitive to social feedback from their peers. And they could see this. Using yearly fMRI scans, they watched as these teens' brains changed, becoming way more sensitive when they were anticipating social rewards and punishments. We're talking about the physical structure of the brain changing.
Okay, so we're seeing actual physical changes in the brain. But to really get why that's happening, we've got to look at how this all manifests emotionally.
And there's actually a term for this. A recent study, this one with over 2,000 college students, calls it digital stress. Think of it as a sustained sense of psychological tension that you experience specifically while using social media. It's not just, normal stress that happens to be online. It's a whole different beast.
And this is what I find so interesting. It's not just one thing. Digital stress is this cocktail of pressures. You've got the fear of missing out, or FOMO, then there's constant social comparison, that feeling of communication overload, anxiety about getting approval, and just this online vigilance, always being on.
So now we have to explore the emotional fallout. Because this digital stress, it doesn't just sit there quietly. It triggers emotional responses that can send you down two very different but related paths to overload.
And what researchers found is that this digital stress can absolutely lead to what they call problematic social media use. And it happens through two really distinct emotional pathways.
Okay, so here's the breakdown. On one hand, you have this high arousal anxiety pathway. This is all about heightened vigilance, that anticipatory worry. It's what makes you constantly check your phone for reassurance. But then, on the other hand, there's the low arousal depression pathway. This is more about emotional exhaustion, feeling helpless, and then using social media to kind of escape from it all.
So, what can be done about all this? Well, this is where it gets hopeful, because the research doesn't just identify the problem, it also points to a really powerful cognitive tool that can change this entire equation.
It's called cognitive reappraisal. Now that sounds fancy, but it's basically an adaptive strategy of reinterpreting an emotional event to change its impact. I love this analogy. Think of it as an emotional shock absorber. It helps you reframe a stressful digital moment before it totally overwhelms you.
So let's look at the impact. Without this tool, what happens is pretty predictable, right? You get high digital stress, and that often correlates directly with high levels of anxiety. It creates this vicious cycle that's really tough to get out of. But, and this is a big but, when you add cognitive reappraisal into the mix, the picture changes. The study found that for students who had strong reappraisal skills, that link was way, way weaker. Even when they had high digital stress, their anxiety was significantly lower. It's like they had a built-in buffer.
So what's next in our understanding? I mean, these findings are fascinating for sure, but scientists know we're just scratching the surface. To really get what's going on, we need a much more detailed map of the developing brain.
And that's the whole goal of this massive study called the Penn Lead Study. It's designed to create an open access data resource to track adolescent brain development and executive function over time. It's a huge undertaking.
And here's what makes this one different. Unlike a lot of past studies that just focused on typically developing kids, this one includes a really diverse group of adolescents. You can see they have participants with ADHD and on the psychosis spectrum. This is so important because it gives us a much richer, more complete picture of how all teenage brains change.
So the crucial point here is that they're using a whole battery of advanced brain scanning techniques.
You see the list here, from structural MRIs to resting state fMRIs. They're not just taking a single snapshot. They are creating this incredibly detailed, longitudinal map of how adolescent brains evolve over time. It's a game changer.
So, the unwritten future. Where does all of this leave us? Navigating a world that's more connected than ever before. It's a big question.
At the end of the day, the science is pretty clear that we're in the middle of this massive, real-time experiment. And as researcher Mitch Prinstein puts it, our research demonstrates that checking behaviors on social media could have long-standing and important consequences for adolescents' neural development. So yeah, the stakes are high.
The story of our relationship with technology is still being written, right? But what's powerful about these studies is that they give us the tools to be more conscious authors of our own next chapter. So it leaves us with this question. Knowing all this, how will you navigate your digital world?